Hi, I'm Zadie. My sister told me not to come to her graduation because I was just a plumber. But what stung more wasn't the words. It was the years I spent paying for her tuition, her rent, her books, while she pretended I didn't exist. And then I found out she forged my name, just to keep the money flowing. They say family is everything, but what happens when everything means you give and they erase you anyway? What would you do if the people you built up tried to delete you from their success? Would you stay quiet? Or would you finally say, enough? The call came just as I was backing my truck out of a client's driveway. It had been a long day, 3 clogged sinks, a busted water heater, and a baby shower where I fixed the bathroom faucet in heels because I was already there. My hands still smelled like PVC glue, and my boots tracked more mud than I cared to admit. But I felt good. Tired, sure, but the kind of tired that comes from honest work. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. Valora. That name used to make me smile. I parked, wiped my hands on a towel draped over the seat, and answered. Hey, what's up? There was a pause. Just air. Then her voice, careful, distant, too smooth. Zadie, I've been meaning to call you. My stomach clenched. She only used that tone when something was about to be taken away. Everything okay? I asked. She hesitated. So, Dorian's parents are flying in for graduation. His whole family, actually. It's kind of a big deal. I stayed quiet, waiting for the point. I just think, she said, slower now, with everything going on, maybe it's best if you skip the ceremony this year. It took me a second to understand. You don't want me there. No, she rushed. That's not what I said. It's just, they're very traditional and formal, and you know how you can come off. How I can what? I asked. I'm just saying, showing up in your uniform, covered in grease and all, might not give the best impression. I pulled over. My heart didn't pound. It just dropped. Quietly, like a tool falling from a shelf. So, I said carefully, after 3 years of tuition payments, rent coverage, and book stipends, you're embarrassed that your plumber sister might make your boyfriend's parents uncomfortable? Zadie, don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything. I'm just finally hearing it. Silence. Then she said it, the sentence that didn't even try to pretend anymore. I just don't want them to think we're from a blue-collar family. There it was, clear as day, the truth she'd been packaging in politeness for months. I hung up without another word. By the time I got home, the sun had dipped behind the hills. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my boots, and sat at the edge of the couch for a while, still in my work shirt, still smelling faintly of copper pipe and detergent. I didn't move. The TV played on mute, background noise I didn't hear. My phone buzzed again. It was Ramona. She rarely texted unless it was a holiday or someone died. I just overheard your mom and Valora talking. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but Valora said having you at the ceremony would throw off the photos. I'm really sorry, Z. I stared at that message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type anything back. I deleted it, not because it didn't hurt, but because it hurt enough to remember without having to look at it again. That night, I lay on the couch without turning on a light. No tears. Just this quiet weight pressing on my chest. Not panic, just stillness. And beneath that stillness, something else. Forming. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder. Resignation. I'd built my life on fixing what was broken. Pipes, heaters, toilets, and sometimes people. But for the first time, I realized that no matter how many leaks I sealed, some things were never meant to be held together. I closed my eyes. My hands ached, my back throbbed, and all I could hear was her voice. I just don't want them to think we're from a blue-collar family. She didn't just uninvite me. She erased me like I was a typo in her success story. I spent the next couple of days doing what I always did, working. It helped keep my mind from going places it didn't need to linger. When I'm bent over a sink or snaking a drain, the world quiets down. There's a rhythm to fixing things. You find the problem, Get your hands dirty and make it right. That Friday afternoon, I was in the back restroom of a small diner off Yale Avenue, replacing a leaky faucet. The owner, an older man named Carl, always paid in cash and sent me home with a slice of pie. I was wiping down the sink when my phone buzzed on the edge of the counter. Notifications rolled in, one after another, like raindrops on a windshield. Facebook. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Right at the top of my feed, posted by my cousin Jill, was a photo that stopped me cold. It was Valora. Her, Dorian, Mom, Uncle Ron, Aunt Delia, everyone. A long table dressed in white linen, candles lit, champagne flutes raised. A small black banner over the picture read, "Family Graduation Dinner." Family. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't even mentioned. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours. My gloves were still on. The wrench rested by the sink, forgotten. When people stop saying your name long enough, you start to wonder if they ever really meant to remember it. I packed up my tools, thanked Carl with a half smile, and got in the truck. The diner's neon sign flickered in the rear view as I pulled away. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. I drove until the sun dipped low enough to throw golden stripes across the windshield. I didn't know where I was going. I just didn't want to go home yet. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a little park near my old elementary school. The benches were peeling. The water fountain hadn't worked since the Obama administration. I sat there, engine ticking as it cooled. And I remembered Valora's first year at college, how I helped her move into that tiny dorm room with the cinder block walls and squeaky bed frame. She cried the first night, and I ordered Thai food just to distract her. I paid her deposit, bought her books, made sure she didn't need to worry about work so she could focus. She used to call me her rock, but that rock didn't fit the photos anymore. Somewhere between that dorm room and that dinner table, I became the kind of family they edited out. My phone rang. I expected silence. Instead, it was Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "Honey," she said, sounding as if she'd been preparing for this conversation all day. "Let's not make this into something it's not." That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know. "Valora just wanted to make a good impression with Dorian's family," she continued. "It's important to her future. You understand, right?" I didn't answer. "You know how you are," she added. "Excuse me? I'm not saying anything bad, I'm just, you show up in boots and a uniform, and, well, not everyone gets it." I let that sit in the silence between us. Then I said, "Do you remember who's been paying for her schooling?" She sighed like I was exhausting her. "We all chip in where we can, sweetheart." It took everything in me not to laugh. "No, Mom, you don't. You've never sent a check. Not for tuition, not for rent, not even for books." "That's not fair," she said quickly, like I'd hit a nerve. "I've given plenty, my time, my support." "Okay," I said, cutting her off gently. "Thanks for calling." She started to say something else, but I ended the call. There was no point anymore. I sat in the truck a while longer, watching the sky shift from amber to bruised purple. The park lights buzzed on, casting dim halos across the cracked pavement. That night, I went home, showered the day off me, and poured myself a glass of water. I stood in the kitchen, the overhead light humming faintly, and pulled open the drawer where I kept my files. Invoices, receipts, bank statements. I laid them out on the table, one by one. Valora's tuition payments, her apartment rent, even the down payment for her bar prep course. All under my name. If I didn't have a seat at their table, maybe it was time they stopped eating off my plate. The screen glowed in the dim kitchen, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. I closed the folder, stood up slowly, and turned off the light. The next morning, I got up early. Earlier than usual. The kind of early that doesn't need an alarm because your body's already too wired to rest. I made coffee, not because I needed it, but because ritual keeps your hands busy while your head catches up. I was going over invoices for a leak I'd fixed the day before when it came through. Subject: immediate action required, tuition payment pending. I didn't even flinch. There it was. Valora's name, her student account, the balance due, the gentle reminder that without my financial support, her graduation was at risk. I clicked through the portal. The entire history stared back at me. 3 years of transactions, housing fees, textbook reimbursements, meal plans, even that bar prep registration fee. All tied to my name. I wasn't a footnote. I was the foundation. And yet, I wasn't family enough to be in a photo. No one called to say thank you. No one emailed to confirm I was still good to cover this last payment. But the system sure knew who to ping when money was due. I leaned back in my chair. The sun was just beginning to stretch across the living room rug. Dust hung in the air, caught in that golden hush. For a brief second, I let myself sit with it. Not angry, not hurt. Just clear. That clarity didn't last long. 2 days later, I came home to an envelope wedged under my front door. No stamp, no return address. Just my name scribbled in what looked like Valora's rushed handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Not an invite, not a program, not even the school's logo. Just, if you still want to come, there might be room near the back. No, dear Zadie. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just that line, tossed like a bone to a dog that had stopped barking. If Valora thought that piece of paper fixed things, she didn't know me at all. I set it on the counter and stared at it for a long while. Then I folded it in half and slid it into the trash without saying a word. I didn't need a performance seat. I wasn't there for the act anymore. That night, I logged back into the university portal. I clicked through every document I had access to, payment dates, billing statements, confirmations. I downloaded them all. Then I created a folder on my desktop. Valora, Records. I wasn't doing this to be petty. I was doing this to be ready. People lie. Screenshots don't. The next morning, I brewed my coffee again, this time without shaking hands. I took a breath, opened my laptop, and went back to the payment portal. At the top of the screen, a red banner read, "Your saved payment method is active." Under it was my card, last 4 digits, expiration date, still tied to her. I hovered over the option. Remove. A confirmation window appeared. Are you sure you want to remove this as a saved payment method? This action cannot be undone. Funny how the system gives you a warning before you cut ties. More than my family ever did. I clicked yes. The screen flickered for a second, then cleared. Just like that, I was out. Off the hook. No more hidden lifeline. No more quiet obligation. I closed the laptop gently and took another sip of coffee. Let her figure it out like the rest of us. The morning after I removed myself from Valora's account, I woke before my alarm. It wasn't anxiety, it was clarity. I poured my coffee, opened the window just a crack, and let the air roll in. Outside, the world was just starting to stir. Dogs barking faintly in the distance, a delivery truck rumbling past the corner, tires crunching against loose gravel. I took a long sip, set the mug down, and reached for my phone. 8:07 a.m. Valora. Incoming call. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Then again. By the 5th time, I figured I might as well hear what she had to say. The voicemail clicked on. Static, then her voice. Hi, frantic. Zadie, what did you do? My account is frozen. I can't register for finals. I can't print my gown. Are you serious right now? I hit delete. A 6th call came in. I blocked the number. Not out of anger, but preservation. I wasn't lashing out. I was holding on to the only thing she hadn't taken from me, my quiet. The silence didn't last long. 10 minutes later, I checked my inbox. It was full. Mom, Aunt Delia, Uncle Ron. Subject lines like, "Why would you do this?" Just talk to her. This isn't the time for games. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. There was a rhythm to them, each one blaming me, none of them asking what Valora had done to put us here in the first place. I created a new folder on my desktop, Receipts, Screenshots, voicemails, emails. No commentary, no revenge plan, just evidence. Not for court, not for Facebook, just for me. To remember I wasn't imagining any of it. That's what they do, isn't it? Make you feel crazy for finally setting a boundary they never thought you'd dare. I poured another cup of coffee, walked it to the window, and stood quietly while the sun spread across my neighbor's lawn. I could hear a lawnmower starting up 2 houses down. Another voicemail slipped through. This one from Valora again. Her voice cracked halfway through. "You've made me look horrible. Do you even care what this makes me look like? I'm supposed to walk that stage in front of Dorian's family, and now I look like I can't manage my own life." That was the tell, right there. Not, "I'm scared." Not, "I messed up." Not even, "I need help." Just, "This makes me look bad." I didn't save that one either. I whispered to myself, "There it is." It's strange what breaks you, not the yelling, not the betrayal. It's the realization that you were only ever valuable until your existence got inconvenient. Later that afternoon, Mom called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. "Zadie, I know you're upset, but this is your sister's future. You've always been the strong one. You've always picked up where others fall short. Don't let pride ruin what we've built." I sat with that. What we've built. I'd built it. Me. My paychecks, my weekends, my overtime hours, my skipped vacations, my frozen grocery bills while Valora ordered takeout 3 nights a week in law school. She built a narrative, I built the foundation. And now that foundation had finally crumbled. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, watching the light dim around me. I opened a blank message, typed out a single line to my mother, then hovered over send. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then pressed it. I didn't walk away from the family. I just stopped carrying it alone. Then I muted the thread. All of it. The calls, the texts, the guilt-ridden voicemails. I muted them all. For the first time in a long time, the noise stopped. Not just around me, but in me. That night, I slept through without waking once. The next few days were strangely quiet. I kept my head down, took jobs that paid cash, and stayed off social media. I didn't avoid people. I just didn't feel like pretending. I went to work, came home, ate, slept. No small talk, no distractions. 4 days after I blocked them all, I was between clients, parked behind a bakery downtown, eating a cold sandwich in the driver's seat of my van. A notification popped up on my phone, a tag on a Facebook photo. That was strange. I hadn't been tagged in anything in weeks. Curious, I tapped it. It was Jill again, my cousin. She'd posted an album, grateful for the ones who made this possible. The cover photo showed Valora, standing in front of the university's graduation banner, surrounded by family. Mom, Uncle Ron, Dorian, even Marla's church friend Teresa made the cut. I swiped through each image slowly, and then I saw it. One photo, taken at the graduation hall entrance, caught the edge of my shoulder, just the corner of my jacket. I remembered being nearby that day, dropping off paperwork for a plumbing permit 2 buildings over. I'd walked past the ceremony entrance without realizing she was already inside. In the edited version Jill posted, I was cropped out completely. No trace, no mention, no tag. They didn't just uninvite me. They erased me, as if I'd never existed in that part of her life at all. I locked my phone, set it down, and just sat there. Not angry, just hollow. Like someone had reached into a drawer and taken something I hadn't realized was still mine. A few minutes later, I pulled up to a client's house, a small 2-bedroom in a quiet cul-de-sac. I replaced a rusted kitchen valve and tightened a few fixtures in the laundry room. When I finished, I grabbed a coffee from the cafe around the corner and found a seat near the window. I was halfway through my drink when the next hit came. A comment on Jill's post. "Your parents must be so proud to have put her through law school. What a beautiful family." That was the one. I didn't reply. I didn't like it. I didn't start an argument. But I did get a direct message. It was from Lorna Reyes, Valora's old roommate during undergrad. We'd met once. I barely remembered her. Hi, Zadie. Random, I know. But wasn't it you who paid for all that? Just curious. She always said her parents covered everything. I stared at the message for a while. Then I typed back. Apparently, I was just the bank, not the story. Lorna didn't respond right away, but the message was seen, and that was enough. When I got home that evening, I opened my laptop, logged into my drive, and created a new folder. Proof, image erasure. Inside it, I saved the screenshots, photos, comments, the direct message. I didn't know what I planned to do with them. I just needed to keep them. Needed to remind myself this happened, that I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't in my head. When the truth makes people uncomfortable, they don't argue it. They just crop it. I decided I would stop trying to be seen and start preserving what I knew. The next morning, I was back at work, replacing a faulty water heater, when my phone buzzed again. Another tag. This time, someone had reshared the album and mentioned me directly. I ignored it. But I knew Valora wouldn't. Later that afternoon, the message came through. Why are you trying to ruin this for me? It was so perfectly Valora. No, hi. No, can we talk? Not even a fake smile emoji. Just accusation, projection. I typed a single reply. I haven't said a word. And I hadn't. But others had started asking, quietly, curiously, just enough to make the image crack. She couldn't stop that. And for the first time, she couldn't control what people whispered behind her back. After Valora's message, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have a response, but because silence had finally started to work in my favor. It was a strange kind of power, watching someone used to control finally unravel when the script didn't go her way. 3 days passed. I focused on my plumbing jobs, got home early enough to cook real meals, and even cleaned out the garage. It felt like reclaiming space, not just in my house, but in my life. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, just as I finished a job replacing old pipes in a rental near the fairgrounds, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I let those go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Hello? Hi, is this Ms. Zadie Callow? A young woman's voice asked, formal but unsure. Yes. This is Carrie from the University of Tulsa Billing Department. I wanted to follow up regarding your removal as a financial sponsor on a student account. I closed the van door and sat down on the driver's seat. I'm listening. Well, we received confirmation that your payment method was removed on file, but we also had a new authorization submitted under your name again. My jaw tightened. Excuse me? It's a recent form, about 48 hours ago. Same name, same information. But the signature doesn't appear to match prior documentation. And, well, we're required to verify before reactivating anything. I was quiet for a second. Can you send me a copy? Of course, she replied. Just for internal record keeping? No, I said flatly. For mine. I hung up, parked outside a coffee shop, and pulled out my laptop. The email arrived minutes later. Attached was a scanned PDF, an official form authorizing future tuition-related payments. It had my name, my address, my last 4 digits of the account, everything identical to what I'd submitted years before. But the signature wasn't mine. It was an attempt at imitation, close enough to fool a glance, but I knew my own handwriting, like I knew the lines on my palm. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't pace the floor. I didn't scream. I printed the document at home, slid it into a file sleeve, and placed it next to the stack of receipts and bank statements I'd already been compiling. Payment logs, digital transfers, screenshots of Valora thanking Mom and Dad for their support on social media. The facade was cracking, and now I had the paperwork to prove it. You don't have to yell to be dangerous, I murmured. You just have to have documentation. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my phone, and called my mother. She picked up fast, too fast. Zadie, honey. I need you to tell Valora to stop using my name. There was a beat. She's under a lot of pressure. She didn't mean anything malicious by it. You do realize this is fraud, right? I said, keeping my voice even. She submitted my financial information without my consent. She's scared, Mom said quickly. She just wants to finish school. You pulling away now? It'll ruin everything she's worked for. She already ruined it, and now she's dragging me down with her. Zadie, come on. Be reasonable. You know she's not trying to hurt you. She forged my name, Mom, on a legal form. Don't stand there and pretend it's a misunderstanding. She sighed. Don't ruin her future over a piece of paper. I ended the call, not out of rage, out of clarity. I didn't owe them a debate. By the time the sun had gone down, I had written a short formal notice. Notice of fraudulent authorization. Zadie Callow, beneath it. I listed the date of the forgery, attached the form, and included a statement of disassociation from Valora Quinn's financial account, along with supporting records. I sent the email directly to the university's financial aid office, CCing the compliance department. No dramatic subject line, no long explanation, just facts, just truth. Once sent, I sat back, finished the cup of tea I'd forgotten on the counter, and turned off the lights. I wasn't trying to ruin Valora's life, but I was no longer going to let her keep rewriting mine. I wasn't her villain, but I was going to be her consequence. I didn't have to wait long. By the time the weekend rolled around, the silence I'd carefully built cracked under the pressure Valora couldn't stand. It started subtle, an aunt tagging me in a vague status about loyalty and pride, a cousin posting some cryptic quote about burning bridges no one asked you to cross. I kept working. Monday came, and I was under a sink tightening a corroded flange when a notification lit up my phone. Just a preview. Can you believe what she did to her own sister? It wasn't even surprising. Valora had started spinning the story. In her version, I wasn't a provider. I was a saboteur. Jealous, bitter, out to destroy her big moment, because I couldn't handle her success. I didn't reply. I didn't comment. I didn't even delete the tag. I took a screenshot. Then, I saved it in a new folder I'd started that morning. Deflection Tactics. People like Valora don't own their choices. They just rebrand the fallout. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the public library to print out the forged form again. I wanted hard copies, in case things escalated. I knew Valora, and I knew the closer she got to being exposed, the messier she'd become. She didn't fight clean. She fought familiar. With guilt, with shame, with narrative. As I stood waiting by the printer, I got a message from Ramona. Zadie, Mom doesn't want me to say anything, but your mom took out a payday loan, transferred the money straight to Valora's account yesterday. I thought you should know. I stared at the screen. They would literally go into debt before acknowledging I'd ever held them up. I didn't respond. What was there to say? I left the library, dropped off tools at a client's house, and stopped by a cafe to collect myself before heading home. It was quiet inside, warm, with that soft smell of coffee and wood that somehow slows your breathing. I sat near the back and pulled out my notebook, jotting down dates, names, account entries, just keeping everything straight. That's when I saw him. Dorian. He was standing by the counter, reading something on his phone. He hadn't seen me yet, and I thought about ducking down. I didn't want to have a conversation that felt like cleaning up Valora's mess. But then he looked up. Our eyes met. To his credit, he didn't pretend not to know me. He walked over slowly, shoulders a little slumped, expression somewhere between apology and regret. Zadie, he said quietly. Dorian. He pulled out the chair across from me. Is it okay? I nodded once. I called the university, he said after a pause. I wanted to understand what was going on. They told me everything. I didn't say a word, just let the weight of his own discoveries settle in the air between us. She said it was all a misunderstanding, that you were overreacting. But after talking to the billing office and reading some of her old texts again, I realized I never really questioned what she told me about you. I still didn't speak. I wanted him to say it all himself. You paid for everything, he continued, almost to himself. The tuition, the bar prep, all of it. He looked down, then back at me. You're not the person she described, and I'm sorry for believing her. I finally exhaled. You deserve to know the truth. He nodded. Then, with a kind of tired finality, said, I moved out last night. He didn't ask for sympathy, and I didn't offer it. We just sat there for another minute, then he stood. Take care of yourself, Zadie. You too. That night, I got 3 voicemails in a row. The first was Valora. Angry, frantic. You told him, didn't you? You couldn't just stay quiet. You ruined everything. He left. Because of you. The second was Mom. I know things are tense, but airing this out with outsiders isn't the answer. Family matters should stay in the family. The third was Aunt Delia. I never thought you'd be the kind to bring someone down just to feel important. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, listening to all of it. Then I played Valora's message again. Not because I needed to hear it, but because I wanted to hear her say the words. You ruined everything, I whispered back to the empty room. No, Valora, you did that all on your own. I sat at the kitchen table well past midnight. The files were spread out like puzzle pieces I'd finally stopped trying to force together. My laptop screen dimmed on its own from inactivity, the glow fading to black, leaving me in the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of this old house settling. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. The truth was all there, printed and stacked neatly in front of me. Receipts, wire transfers, email confirmations, that forged signature Valora thought she could slip under the radar. And screenshots, dozens of them, capturing every social media post where she thanked our parents for their endless support. Carefully written, publicly presented lies. No need for confrontation. No speeches. I didn't want an apology. I didn't even want recognition anymore. I wanted closure. So I began assembling the final step. 3 identical manila envelopes. 1 for the university's legal office. 1 for Valora. 1 for Marla. Inside each, a copy of the fraudulent authorization form, with the mismatched signature circled in red ink. A cover letter, concise and direct. Evidence of all tuition payments from my account. A statement of disassociation, signed and dated. And a simple note clipped to Valora's. You knew better, and you did it anyway. By morning, I showered, dressed, and drove down to the university. The parking lot was quiet. Students were still on break. I walked into the admin building with the envelope tucked under my arm. The receptionist greeted me. I handed it over without a word. She opened her mouth, maybe to ask what it was, but I turned and left before she could. No drama, no performance, just delivery. On the way home, I stopped by the neighborhood mailbox. I slid the remaining 2 envelopes inside and stood there for a moment. It was overcast, the air heavy with spring moisture. A mockingbird perched on the wire above, watching me like it knew something I didn't. I didn't flinch. I didn't second guess. The truth didn't need defending anymore. Back at home, I made tea and sat by the window with my planner, sketching out a schedule for upcoming plumbing jobs. Saturday had 3 back-to-back appointments. Monday, I'd drive out to Broken Arrow for a stubborn drain line that kept backing up. Somewhere between my second sip and rechecking my mileage logs, my voicemail dinged. It was a university counselor. Hi, Ms. Callow. Just letting you know that we received your documentation. Thank you for providing such thorough clarity. We'll be moving forward with a formal review on our end. No further action needed from you at this time. That was it. No fanfare. Just a thank you and a closed door. I placed the phone down beside me, not touching it again for hours. By dusk, another voicemail came in. Valora. Her voice was raw. Not the shrieking tone I'd heard before. This one sounded hoarse, stretched thin. a mixture of desperation and blame. "You destroyed me. I hope you're happy." There was no follow-up, no breath behind it, just that one line. And then a click. I listened once, then deleted it. She always thought this was a battle, me against her image against my presence. But the truth was, I never wanted to win anything. I just wanted peace. She wanted to win a war I never even declared. She lost to the truth, not to me. She had nothing left to take from me, and I had nothing left to give her. 2 weeks passed, not quickly, not quietly, but with the kind of steady rhythm you only notice once you stop waiting for a storm. The text came on a Thursday morning. My phone was on the windowsill while I was cleaning out the back of the van, organizing fittings, tossing out old gloves, stacking toolboxes that had somehow multiplied over the years. It buzzed once, then stopped. I wiped my hands, picked it up. "Marla, we're still family. Please call." "Valora's in a bad place." I stared at the message for a full minute. There was no sting, just a weightless echo where pain used to live. I didn't reply. It wasn't indifference. It was detachment. The kind that comes after you've already bled out the part of yourself that used to ache for inclusion. The kind of peace you earn, not ask for. Once, I would have dropped everything to run toward that message. Maybe even tried to fix it. Patch something up. Be the strong one, like she always said I was. Now, I just set the phone down and went back to sorting copper elbows. That night, after dinner, I sat at the dining table with a blank piece of paper in front of me. No letterhead, no template, just a pen and some space I didn't owe anyone but myself. I started writing, not to Valora, not to Mom, to the version of me that stayed too long. That made excuses. That bought textbooks for someone who couldn't bother to say her name in public. "You were never too much," I wrote. "You were just trying too hard in the wrong places, and that's not your fault." My hand paused, pen hovering just above the paper. "They didn't see you," I added. "Not because you were invisible, but because they never looked past what they could use." I didn't sign it. I folded it neatly and tucked it in the back of my journal. Later that weekend, while looking for an old socket wrench, I stepped into the workshop. My eyes landed on a framed invoice nailed to the wall, a printout from 5 years ago. The first payment I ever made toward Valora's education. I pulled it down without ceremony. Back inside, I opened the storage bin labeled closed accounts and gently slid it in. No fire, no tearing, no big gesture, just a quiet, intentional end. Not everything needs to be forgiven, but it can be finished. A few days later, while I was redoing piping at a house across town, my neighbor, Joe, waved me down as I was unloading the van. "Hey, Zadie," he called. "You still do work for the Quinns?" I paused. "Why?" "They've been asking around. I think their upstairs tub's leaking again." I smiled politely, the kind of smile that ends a conversation. "I only fix what people want to keep working." He blinked. "Got it, just thought I'd check." I nodded, finished unloading, and headed toward the house. On the way home, I took the long route through the park. The wind had picked up just enough to move the trees, but not strong enough to bend them. I pulled over, got out, and walked along the gravel path with my hands in my pockets. There was a time I thought closure meant sitting across from someone who'd wronged you and hearing them say all the things you'd been waiting to hear. But it doesn't. Sometimes it's walking away without waiting for anyone to follow. Some things, once broken, are not meant to be repaired, but they can be left behind, gently. Before we close this story, let me share something with you, not as a narrator, but as a woman who's lived every second of it. I used to think being strong meant staying silent, that if I just gave a little more, helped one more time, stayed out of the way, I'd earn my place. I'd be valued. But what I've learned is this: silence doesn't always mean peace, and sacrifice, without recognition or respect, becomes self-erasure. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Speaking up doesn't make you disloyal. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to walk away from the role they've cast you in, especially when they've written you out of the script entirely. Maybe you've been the giver in your family. Maybe you've been the one carrying burdens that no one thanks you for, while others rewrite the story. If so, I hope my experience gives you permission to reclaim your name, your voice, your space. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose peace over people? Have you ever had to walk away not because you didn't care, but because you finally did? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something in you, or share where you're watching from. It's always a joy to see how far our stories travel. And if you didn't connect with this video, let me know why. I'm always here to listen and grow with you. If this message resonated, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more real, raw, and healing stories that honor the strength in quiet women and the power of walking away with grace. Thanks for spending your time here with me. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and stay grounded. Hi, my name's Maribel. They said it was just a seating error, a policy misunderstanding, a mistake. But when your own sister pulls you out of first class in front of a crowd, and your mother calls, not to ask if you're okay, but to say you've embarrassed the good daughter, you start wondering, how many years did they spend rehearsing that silence? And if I never spoke up, how many more would they rewrite me out of the picture? What do you do when your family doesn't just forget you? They erase you on purpose? Would you have stayed quiet? It had been 5 years since I last saw her. 5 years without a call, a text, a holiday card. But the moment I stepped up to the first-class counter, holding my printed boarding pass like it was proof I deserved to exist, she recognized me. Darlene. Perfect hair, regulation uniform, name tag polished. She didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't even pretend she didn't know me. Economy lines over there. You're in the wrong place. No pause, no warmth, no hesitation, just cold delivery. I stood there, holding my passport and ticket, dressed in a beige sweater and jeans. I knew how I looked. Comfortable, understated, maybe forgettable. Not high profile, not polished like her, but definitely not out of place in the first-class line. Still, the man behind me let out a half sigh. The woman with a designer bag gave me the once-over, and that familiar heat, embarrassment, started crawling up my spine. I think there's a mistake, I said, soft enough that it almost sounded like an apology. Darlene didn't even bother to look at the ticket again. No, there isn't. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes said it all. Not you. Not here. I stepped aside, my throat tight, fingers curling around the edge of my ticket like it might suddenly erase what just happened. But this wasn't new. This was muscle memory. When I was 13, she convinced our music teacher I had stage fright. Got my solo reassigned. She told our neighbors I wasn't really into school because some kids just don't have that spark. She never raised her voice, never made a scene. She just removed me, quietly, efficiently. And every time, she made it look like I had misunderstood something. Now here I was, standing in the exact place I paid to be in, and somehow, still being told I didn't belong. She didn't ask why I was flying, didn't ask how I'd been, didn't ask if I needed anything. She just saw me and moved me out of her frame again. I walked away from the line. I didn't know where I was going, not really, just away. That's when a man, maybe mid-50s, plaid shirt, travel pillow slung around his neck, tapped my shoulder. You okay, miss? I nodded, not trusting my voice to do anything useful. I headed toward a quiet corner of the terminal, near one of those massage chairs no one ever uses. Sat down, still holding my boarding pass like a receipt for a refund I couldn't claim. Invisibility is a strange thing. You don't even realize it's been happening until someone looks right through you. And Darlene? She'd been doing it since the day I was born. But today felt different. Today, I had something she didn't know I had. Leverage. Maybe it wasn't just about her pretending I didn't belong. Maybe she'd built a whole system on people like me staying silent. And if that was true, then she had no idea what was coming. I didn't move far. A couple gates over, near the glass wall facing the runway, there was a bench open beside an out-of-order vending machine. I sat there just long enough to catch my breath, then made my way back toward the check-in area. If I left now, she'd win, and I wasn't in the mood to hand her another quiet victory. As I stepped back into the first-class zone, Darlene had shifted position, still at her podium, talking to a younger male agent. She was all smiles now, charming, efficient, but when she saw me approach, her face didn't just change. It dropped, like the act was too heavy to hold for more than a few minutes. I handed her my boarding pass. She didn't take it right away. She looked at it like I'd handed her a napkin with gum inside. "Maribel?" she said, tilting her head. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She narrowed her eyes, flipped the pass between her fingers, checking it like I'd stolen it. "This yours?" she asked, one brow raised. I nodded. She leaned in slightly, not to whisper, but to lower the pitch of her voice just enough so that it sounded like she was doing me a favor by not saying what she really wanted to say. Then came the line that hit harder than the first. "Doesn't match the look." People around us shifted. One woman clutched her tote bag tighter. A teenage boy behind me half smiled, waiting for a scene. I didn't give them one. My lips pressed together. I didn't argue, didn't protest. But inside, I was taking inventory of every time she'd called me invisible with her eyes, of every room she had claimed by simply refusing to let me in. I glanced down at the counter, at the reflective surface, and saw myself. Not glamorous, not intimidating, just present. And that alone seemed to offend her. "My name is on the ticket," I said, voice level. "That should be enough." She didn't respond. She looked at the agent beside her, then at the queue behind me, and finally back at me. "We'll have to verify this. Please wait aside." There was no apology in her tone, no grace in her delivery, just procedure being weaponized. I stepped away, again. But this time, something shifted in me. I didn't feel smaller, I felt sharper. There's something about being consistently underestimated that teaches you patience, and something about being sidelined your whole life that gives you an extraordinary talent for watching people reveal themselves. I stood a few feet from the counter, not pacing, not fidgeting, just still, watching. That's when it hit me. She wasn't surprised to see me here. She was surprised I made it this far on my own, and maybe that scared her more than anything. See, when people disappear from your life long enough, you start inventing justifications for their absence. Not because you believe them, because the truth hurts too much to carry around every day. I used to think Darlene pulled away from me because we were just different people, different goals, different lives. But I see it now. I wasn't missing from her world. I was erased, on purpose. Standing next to me didn't fit the version of herself she wanted people to see. So she cut me out, quietly, strategically, just like she did with anyone who didn't polish her reflection. A few more people boarded. The line moved on. I could hear her voice again, cheerful now, smooth, fake as dollar store perfume. Then, suddenly, louder than necessary, "We'll have to verify this, please wait aside." Like she needed everyone to hear it one more time. I nodded. "Of course," I said. My voice came out flat, but clear. She questioned my identity in front of strangers. Loudly, with purpose. But I wasn't angry anymore, just aware. The question wasn't whether I belonged. The question was, how long would I let her keep pretending I didn't? I didn't move much after she told me to step aside, just stood off to the side of the gate, where the glare from the terminal windows couldn't quite reach. My boarding group was already on its way in. Suits, watches, voices that never lowered when talking about business. And there I was, standing alone with a ticket I'd paid for and a name that apparently didn't match the look. The gate agent began scanning passengers in groups. The same scanner that had just confirmed my seat, my flight, my identity. Green light. But it didn't matter anymore. Because it wasn't about the scanner, it was about her. I waited. Tried to calm the beat of my heart the same way I used to calm myself during fire drills in school, by staring at something fixed and breathing through my teeth. Then they called the final boarding group. I stepped forward again. No fanfare, no confidence, just quiet resolve. I held my boarding pass out, let it scan. That familiar tone chimed. The light blinked green. I started to walk. But before my second step, I felt a hand, light but firm, wrap around my arm. "Excuse me, ma'am," Darlene said, the edges of her smile sharp as paper. "I believe there's been a mistake." I pulled my arm gently away. It scanned green. "I'm aware," she said, keeping her tone just low enough to sound professional. "But you're not on the first-class manifest. I need you to step aside." People turned. Not all of them, just enough. The couple from earlier. The man with the Rolex. A kid with earbuds in but one eye on us. I stared at her. "My name is Maribel Trevors. That's my seat." Darlene's mouth moved, but it wasn't speech. It was calculation. Then she spoke louder this time, deliberately over-articulating. "You're not on the manifest for first class. Please step aside." Now everyone was watching. My fingers tightened around the strap of my tote. I could have reached into it, pulled out the email confirmation, opened the app, called over a supervisor. But the deeper truth was harder to explain, and more humiliating. She knew I belonged on that list. She'd seen the manifest before I ever arrived. She just didn't want me in that cabin. Not because of protocol, but because of proximity. She needed to make sure everyone there knew that she, Darlene, the respected senior flight lead, was nothing like the woman in the beige sweater with scuffed flats. Behind me, someone whispered, "This is ridiculous." A few chuckles. A sigh. I looked down at my ticket again. It hadn't changed. Neither had my seat assignment, only her willingness to let me claim it. I looked up, found her eyes. She didn't flinch. I gave the pass to the other attendant, who was standing slightly behind her, uncertain. She looked younger, early 20s maybe, new. The kind who still asked questions silently with her eyes. I didn't say anything, I just nodded once. Then I turned, walked down the bridge, not toward first class, but to the back. The long walk, past rows of narrow seats, legs spilling into aisles, overhead bins already full, and no room for anyone like me to be angry. My seat was in the rear half of economy. A middle seat, ironically. I placed my bag overhead, sat down, and buckled in with fingers that felt disconnected from my body. People around me barely noticed. Someone coughed. A woman flipped through a travel magazine. The hum of the plane filled the space like a curtain, shielding me from the world I wasn't allowed to be part of. That was the moment it sunk in. Not the seat change, not the whispers, but how fast and easy it had been for her to do it. No hesitation, no apology, just another deletion, masked as procedure. She didn't just move me, I thought. She erased me, and no one said a damn thing. Out of the corner of my eye, the younger attendant passed by. She glanced at me, briefly, but said nothing. Just kept walking, lips tight. Then I heard it. 2 rows up, 2 voices. Low, but not quiet enough. Did she just pull her own sister out of first class? My breath caught. They knew, they all knew. And they let it happen anyway. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew exactly which voice said it, and I knew what they meant. Some people whisper because they're afraid. Others whisper because they enjoy watching someone else fall. That kind of whisper, it leaves a mark. I leaned into the window, pressing my fingers lightly against the cool frame. Outside, clouds moved slow and silent, like they didn't know what just happened. Or maybe they did, and they were just tired of reacting. The woman in the aisle seat beside me was flipping through a crossword book. Not once did she look up. Maybe she was being polite, maybe indifferent. I didn't care either way. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I just needed stillness. They always say the worst pain is silence, I thought, watching the wing slice through sky. But it's the silence that comes after someone makes you disappear that cuts deeper. 30,000 feet in the air, and I felt more grounded than I had in years. Because now, I knew what I was up against. Darlene hadn't just hurt me. She'd made me disposable, and she didn't have to raise her voice or call me names to do it. She just used the tools she'd always used: control, performance, and the sharp edge of professionalism that made everyone else think she was doing her job. No message, no apology, nothing from her. Of course not. She'd spent her entire adult life pretending I wasn't there. Why would she start seeing me now? I pulled out the travel wallet in my bag and flipped through the flap, where I usually kept receipts and half-used coffee punch cards. Tucked inside was an old Polaroid, faded now, edges curled, colors warped by time, but I still knew what it was. Me, in a pale blue secondhand dress, standing outside my high school gym on graduation day. My parents flanking me awkwardly, arms stiff, smiles forced. And on the end, Darlene. Her smile broader, her stance perfect, like she belonged in a brochure for sibling harmony. I used to keep that photo on my dresser. For years, it was the only evidence I had that we'd been in the same place at the same time. Just once. Then one day it was gone. I found out weeks later. Darlene had gone through the family albums and reorganized them. My photo never made it back. When I asked her where it went, she didn't blink. It didn't fit the theme, she said, like I was the mismatched napkin at a catered event. I stared at that photo now, back pressed into the thin airplane seat, knees grazing the tray table. I thought about how many times I'd asked for space in her world, only to be told I was asking for too much. But I wasn't. I wasn't asking to be the center. I was asking to be counted. There's something about family that makes the cuts feel deeper. Strangers can hurt you, but family makes it personal, and then tells you it wasn't. They call it teasing. They call it just how she is. They call it keeping peace. She edited me out long before I ever took up space, I whispered to no one, as the seatbelt light dinged overhead. I glanced at the dark screen of the seatback in front of me, catching my reflection. Tired eyes, lips set, chin higher than I expected. I used to think she resented me, I said under my breath. Now I think I just didn't match the story she was telling. And instead of rage, I felt a strange, quiet clarity settle in. I didn't need the photo anymore. I didn't need her to hand me anything, not recognition, not regret. I knew I was there, and I remembered. That was enough. A few rows ahead, a crew member made her way down the aisle. She paused near my row. Not long, just long enough to hover. Her gaze lingered. Then she moved on. But as she passed, I heard her murmur low, just loud enough for the back of my neck to catch the weight of her words. I'd never treat my sister like that. She didn't say it to me. Maybe she didn't even mean for me to hear. But I did. And just like that, I realized someone had been watching. Maybe more than one. After the murmured words from the passing crew member, I stayed still for a moment longer. Then I quietly unbuckled my seatbelt, gathered my things, and made my way to the rear lavatory. I didn't rush. I didn't care if the occupied light turned red behind me. I needed space. Any space that didn't remind me of how small I'd been made to feel. Inside, I locked the door, placed my tote bag on the closed toilet lid, and pulled out a notebook. It wasn't fancy. Just a soft, leather-bound journal I'd been carrying for years, mostly untouched. Pages still stiff with the kind of hesitation that only silence builds. I flipped to a clean page, gripped the pen tighter than I meant to, and started writing. You've never said my name in public, Darlene. Not once. I stopped. Let the sentence sit, the ink still wet. And then, in my head, a flood of memories began rolling in without warning. So fast and sharp I couldn't stop them if I tried. I remembered our cousin's wedding, how Darlene introduced everyone at our table by name, pausing for anecdotes, funny comments. When she got to me, she said, "This is my sister," with the same tone someone uses to introduce their tax accountant. No story, no laugh, not even a proper name. I remembered church picnics where people would ask, "Is that your sister?" And she'd shrug. "She's the youngest." At a family reunion one summer, a neighbor asked how many siblings she had. She smiled and said, "Just me and my brother. The middle child is more of a mystery." I should have said something, but I didn't. I was taught not to make things uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Silence isn't neutral, it's participation. I leaned against the sink, journal still open, pen hovering. She knew my name. She just didn't want to give it air. Because names carry weight. They demand recognition. They make people real. To her, I wasn't useful as a sister, only as a prop. A blank space she could fill however she needed depending on the room. I used to think maybe she was just forgetful, busy. Maybe she didn't like the sound of my name. Maybe she was protecting me from something, embarrassment, awkward questions, whatever. But that was me being generous. That was me doing the emotional math to explain someone else's subtraction. No, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was strategy. She didn't want me to be someone. She wanted me to stay convenient. And the more invisible I stayed, the more spotlight she got. The more her version of the story solidified. I put the pen down and stared at what I'd written. The thing about being erased is that eventually you stop trying to be seen. You start building your world in the shadows. And sometimes the shadows teach you how to shine alone. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. I closed the journal slowly, pressing the cover down like sealing something sacred. Someone knocked gently on the door. "Ma'am?" a soft voice said from outside. "Someone just asked about you." I didn't move. She said, "She's your sister." Of course she did. Now that there's an audience again. I left the lavatory, ignoring the curious glances as I returned to my seat. Darlene didn't follow. She wouldn't. Not without a witness. And certainly not without the right lighting. The cabin had shifted into that quiet lull that comes after a meal on a long flight. Shades down. Passengers either half-dozing, watching silent movies, or flipping through those tired, laminated catalogs of overpriced junk. I leaned back, tilted my head toward the aisle, and closed my eyes, partly to rest, mostly to listen. From just behind the galley curtain, 2 flight attendants whispered in the kind of hushed voices that people use when they think no one's paying attention. They didn't know I was awake. Or maybe they did. People like me have a tendency to blend in, until we don't. "She flagged that guy with the stained jeans last week," one said, barely above a breath. "Said his face was off-brand." The other chuckled. "Classic Darlene. The Darlene system. Rank 'em by look, then reshuffle as needed." I kept my face still, body calm, like someone in light sleep. But inside, my mind locked on every word. Off-brand? System? This wasn't just about me. It was about control, visibility, who got seen and who got shuffled. Darlene didn't just push me out because she could. She'd built a pattern, one that relied on silence and complicity, one that looked a lot like policy, but wasn't. I stayed still, absorbing each syllable like it was testimony. They didn't say my name, but I heard hers. I heard the laughter, the certainty. She didn't climb the ranks because she was excellent at her job. She climbed because she knew how to curate a narrative, one that made passengers feel they were paying for an image, and she'd make sure that image stayed clean, polished, white, thin, unthreatening. I opened my eyes slightly, scanned the cabin. The older black woman who'd boarded with me? Gone. The Latino man with the sleeve tattoos who'd been ahead of me in line? Reassigned. And me, seated in the back row, middle seat near the galley. This wasn't about performance. It was about optics. I took a breath through my nose, slowly. Let the truth settle. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out the same journal from earlier. Not for a quote, not for a poem. This time, I opened to a fresh page and started a list. Flight 287. Passenger, moved after check-in, staff names. Not yet confirmed, conversation overheard. Rank 'em by looks. My handwriting was fast but steady. It felt less like journaling and more like building something. A case, maybe, or a weapon. This wasn't about Darlene and me anymore. This was about a system she'd been allowed to build, unchecked, because people like me assumed we were alone. And maybe that's how systems like this survive, by isolating their targets just enough to make each one think they're the outlier. But I wasn't alone, not anymore. I stared at the ink drying on the page. The weight of it all didn't crush me, it sharpened me. If a system benefits from silence, I wrote beneath the list, then noise becomes a form of justice. The lights flickered slightly as the crew prepared for descent. I clicked the pen closed, tucked the journal into the seat back pocket, and reached for my water cup. Just then, a younger flight attendant passed. She didn't make eye contact, didn't break stride, but she slipped something into my hand as she moved past. A folded napkin. I opened it discreetly beneath the tray table. One sentence, scrawled in pen. "You're not alone. I've seen it too." I read it twice. Then I folded it back up and placed it next to my journal. The plane had begun its slow descent, window shades still drawn, cabin dim, the kind of stillness that only comes when people are too tired to pretend they're not exhausted. I sat upright now, tray table up, hands folded on my lap like I was waiting for a verdict. I kept glancing at the folded napkin beside me. I didn't need to read it again. I'd memorized the slant of the handwriting, the way the words curved like they'd been written in a hurry, but with care. You're not alone. I've seen it too. There was comfort in that sentence, but also weight, because if someone else had seen it, that meant more had, which meant no one said a word. A rustle passed near my shoulder. The younger flight attendant from earlier returned, this time with the breakfast cart. Her eyes met mine just briefly, then shifted away. As she moved down the aisle, she paused, turned back, and silently mouthed something. I couldn't catch it, not all of it, but I saw the shape of one phrase. Not the first. My stomach flipped. When she circled back, she slipped something else into the side pocket of my seat. Not a napkin this time, a folded safety card. I waited until she passed to reach for it. Inside, scrawled in a different hand, cleaner, more practiced. You're not the first. We've seen her do it. We just didn't know she'd do it to family. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt shifted. This was bigger than humiliation, bigger than her voice calling me out in front of a terminal full of strangers. This was a pattern, and I wasn't just a casualty. I was a witness now. I stared ahead, into nothing. My thoughts leapt to someone I hadn't considered in years, Simone. She worked the JFK route for nearly a decade. Always early, always over-prepared. She vanished after a minor altercation with a passenger, or so I'd heard. They said she retired early, I remembered telling someone. But Simone was 39, no kids, no spouse. She wasn't the type to disappear. She was the type to challenge things that didn't sit right. And Darlene? She hated that. She didn't retire, I whispered. She was reassigned, quietly, just like always. The plane dipped lower. Seatbelt signs dinged. I pulled out my notebook again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I flipped back to the list I'd started and underlined the words, Flight 287 twice. Then, I turned the page and wrote across the top. Names, incidents, times. Underneath, I began. Simone L., JFK crew, Flight 217, May 2021. Reported for passenger escalation, removed final message. They made it clear, speak and disappear. I didn't know where this list would go. I just knew it needed to exist. Some people post screenshots, some speak to cameras. Me? I build timelines. Some people scream into microphones, I wrote in the margin. Some build dossiers. I paused, staring at those words. I've always been better at the second. As the landing gear dropped beneath us with a thump, I clicked my pen shut and slid the notebook back into my bag. I didn't feel brave, not exactly, but I felt ready. That's when another voice, a different one, lower, older, bent close beside me as he passed. It was the senior flight attendant, gray at the temples, calm in his posture. He didn't stop walking, just kept going and said, under his breath, "I just want you to know. Some of us are waiting for someone like you to say it first." I didn't answer. I didn't nod. But I did close the notebook again, slowly, with both hands. Not like I was hiding something, but like I was sealing it. "Then I'll be the first," I whispered, "but not the last." By the time I stepped off the jet bridge and into the terminal at O'Hare, the early morning light was breaking through the skyline in streaks of steel and amber. Most travelers were still blinking sleep out of their eyes, dragging bags and kids and bad tempers through security lines or toward coffee kiosks. But me, I walked with a purpose. No stops for baggage claim, no glance toward ground transportation. I turned left out of the gate and took the elevator up to the first-class lounge. It was half full, quiet except for the low hum of TVs and the occasional clink of a spoon against ceramic. I chose the corner booth, farthest from the windows but still facing the tarmac. I wanted space, but I also wanted visibility. Strategic, not emotional. I didn't need pity, I needed momentum. I pulled out my iPad and started typing. Subject, Flight 287. Immediate concern, body. I've seen enough. Please arrange a meeting room at HQ, today. Maribel Trevors, strategic owner. Tier 1 Aviation Holdings. No fluff, no background story. I knew what I was doing, and I wasn't giving them time to pretend they didn't know me anymore. For a moment, I stared at the screen. Not out of doubt. Just to feel the power of that last line. My name, followed by a title Darlene had spent years pretending didn't exist. I hit send. There's something precise about knowing your words will land exactly where they need to. No hashtags, no tears. Just a clean directive with consequences folded inside. I leaned back slightly, letting the hum of the lounge settle around me. Businessmen dozed with neck pillows. Someone was video calling their kid. Over near the window, a woman in a navy dress tapped on her MacBook like she was editing her life in real time. I remembered another time I hit send, years ago. A formal complaint against our former COO, a man who was careful about where he placed his hands and which jokes he told depending on the room. No one thought he'd be removed, but I didn't need belief, I needed proof. And when I gave them that, he was gone within a week. I hadn't spoken at that meeting either. I just laid the file on the table and waited. Some people think justice has to shout, but sometimes it just arrives. On time. In writing. "You didn't say a word," a voice said behind me. I looked up. It was the older flight attendant from the plane, the one who'd passed me with that subtle comment before landing. He didn't sit, just hovered near the edge of the table. "But I read the silence," he added. "I won't be silent much longer," I said, folding my hands. He nodded slowly. "We'll back you. Just say when." I gave him a small smile. It wasn't victory. It wasn't closure. But it was the first moment in a very long time that I didn't feel like I was speaking into a vacuum. He walked away without another word. For the next few minutes, I just sat there, letting the quiet settle in a way that felt earned. I took one last sip of the too-bitter lounge coffee, closed the iPad, and checked my phone. New message. From HQ. Subject. Confirmed. Meeting room 214. Body 11:30 a.m. We've heard things. This isn't just about Darlene anymore, is it? I stared at the words. This isn't just about Darlene anymore. No, it wasn't. Not since they moved the old woman in the aisle seat. Not since Simone vanished off the JFK route. Not since I realized Darlene's weapon wasn't her voice, but the silence of the people around her. I tucked the phone into my blazer pocket, stood, and adjusted the strap of my bag. Justice wasn't a concept anymore. It was a calendar invite. I walked through the terminal like I'd done it 100 times before, shoulders squared, steps even. But this time, I wasn't heading toward a gate. I was heading toward a room where people used to speak about me as if I wasn't in it. That would change today. A staff member in a navy vest met me at the lounge entrance. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't ask who I was there to see. He just nodded once and said, "Follow me." The hallway they led me down was quiet. White walls, frosted glass doors, the faint scent of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. We turned left, and I saw it. Conference room 214. My name was already on the screen outside the door, but I didn't go in right away. Through the glass, I saw her. Darlene. She was standing near the beverage counter, holding a paper cup with both hands, talking to a junior coordinator, like she was conducting a charm seminar. Her voice carried just enough for me to catch the end of a sentence. It's always about perception. Some people just don't carry it well. That's when he arrived. A man in his 40s, pressed suit, earpiece tucked behind one ear. Floor manager, probably. The kind that makes decisions with a glance. The kind Darlene usually wrapped around her finger in under 5 minutes. He walked in without knocking. "Ms. Darlene," he said, not raising his voice, not even glancing at the junior. "You just insulted the boss." Everything stopped. The paper cup in her hand tilted slightly. Her jaw moved before sound caught up. "Excuse me?" she said, with that smile she always used when she was pretending something was funny instead of offensive. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." He didn't blink. "No, I don't think there has." He gestured toward the corner of the room. That's when I stepped inside. Slowly, quietly, but with full presence. Darlene turned. She saw me, and for a half-second, I saw it. Realization, then denial, then the flicker of panic she always tried to swallow. "Maribel?" Her voice broke around the edges. "That's the first time you've said my name aloud in 10 years, I said, without raising mine. She took a step toward me. "I had no idea you were... Why didn't you say anything? We could have..." "If someone needs a title to be treated with basic respect," I interrupted, "they're not worth the respect in return." No one moved. The coordinator, who had been standing beside her, took a small step back. She looked at Darlene like she was seeing a crack in marble for the first time. Darlene looked around the room, as if searching for someone, anyone, who'd step in, save her, speak for her. But the silence was airtight. She started again. "If I had known..." "This isn't about what you knew," I cut in. "It's about what you built, what you got away with because no one pushed back." Her mouth opened, closed. The floor manager tapped something on his phone, looked up. "The board just confirmed. They'll be reviewing your entire conduct record. Effective immediately." That's when she really saw it. The point of no return. She looked at me, voice smaller now. "I didn't know it was you." I took a breath, held it for a moment, then let it out slow. "That's the problem," I said. "You only act decent when it is." And I turned. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't need it, because this time I was the one deciding who stayed in the room. The morning sun crawled across the hotel carpet like it was in no rush. I wasn't either. Not until my phone buzzed so hard it nearly slid off the nightstand. 32 missed calls, over 500 notifications. A text from Ellery. "Brace yourself, you're trending." I opened my inbox. Then Twitter. No, X, now. The video played before I even touched it. Darlene, in full uniform, standing straight-backed at the gate. Her voice clipped, clear. "You're not on the manifest for first class. Please step aside." And there I was, visibly confused, holding my boarding pass, stepping back. The caption read, "Flight attendant removes woman from first class because she doesn't look the part." The video had over 2.3 million views and counting. Thousands of comments. Reposts with headlines like, "Corporate bias in the skies," and "She bought the ticket. She owns the airline." One pinned comment said, "They judged her by her clothes. Turns out she owns the plane." I watched it twice, not because I enjoyed seeing myself, but because for once, People weren't seeing the version of me my sister curated. They were seeing me as I was, calm, stunned, and standing my ground in the face of someone who'd trained her whole life to erase me. TV anchors were debating it now. Split screens. One side defending standard procedure, the other calling it what it was. Aesthetic discrimination. On a talk radio clip someone forwarded, a caller said, "If you look like a certain type, you get treated like you paid less, even when you paid more." I couldn't argue with that. I scrolled until my thumbs ached. Most comments were supportive, some confused, a few skeptical. The usual digital mix. But then I saw it. What cracked something open inside me. A repost of the video with a side-by-side. On one side, the clip of Darlene removing me. On the other, my LinkedIn profile. Title: Strategic Owner, Tier 1 Aviation Holdings. The internet had connected the dots faster than HR ever could. I didn't have to tell them I belonged. They saw it for themselves. A chime. New message from Ellery. Subject: We found something attached was a PDF. Internal email. From Darlene P. 2. Cabin Crew. Image Control Committee. Subject: Cabin Image Protocol. Excerpted lines. First class is our face-forward branding. Avoid overweight, underdressed, or tattoo types. Adjust seatings if needed. Be subtle. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just something she thought. It was something she wrote, something she circulated. She hadn't just acted on bias. She'd institutionalized it. I read it again, slower this time. It wasn't an attitude, I whispered. It was a documented system. Suddenly, everything snapped into place. The reassignments, the people quietly shuffled, the subtle power moves disguised as professionalism. She'd created a culture where exclusion felt like order. I set the tablet down, stared out the window. Chicago's skyline looked jagged, sharp, appropriate. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, text. I was pushed out for not enforcing that protocol. If you speak, I'll back you. I have logs. I sat up straighter, reread the message. It was happening. One voice becomes two become 20. And eventually, it becomes undeniable. But before I could even respond, another notification flashed. Incoming call. Mom. I didn't need to guess what it was about. She wasn't calling to ask how I was, or to say she was proud. She was calling because I'd embarrassed her other daughter. I let the phone ring twice before I answered. Not because I was hesitant, but because I already knew how this would go. I wasn't preparing for impact. I was bracing for the familiar rhythm of guilt dressed up as concern. Is it true? She asked the moment I picked up. No greeting, just sharp. Did you make that scene public? I stood by the window of my hotel room, still in the clothes from the day before, watching the glow of early evening turn the skyline amber. The TV played on mute behind me, flashing clips of news anchors and headlines about airline bias and corporate conduct. I didn't make anything public, I said. It went public because people saw it. She exhaled in that slow, judgmental way she used to when I brought home report cards with anything less than an A. You've embarrassed your sister, she said, her voice tightening. She's worked so hard to get where she is. All these years. Don't you think she deserves a little grace? I blinked. That's what this was. Not concern for me. Not even curiosity, just damage control for Darlene. So did I replied quietly. You should have spoken to her in private. You could have handled this without spectacle. Spectacle? I echoed. She pulled me out of first class, in front of a full gate. That was the spectacle. You're twisting it. No, I'm naming it. She paused, then tried another angle. More cutting, more maternal. Family doesn't air its laundry in public. And family doesn't drag their own blood out of a cabin like they're smuggling shame. I said flatly. Silence. Not the kind that heals. The kind that waits for you to recant. To feel small again. I didn't fill it. You've always had a problem with Darlene's success, she said finally. Ever since she got promoted. Ever since people started respecting her. She earned respect by cutting people out of the picture, I snapped. She built her story by making sure I had no voice in it. I'm not doing this with you, she muttered. You already are, I said, then paused. But not for long. The tone shifted. The kind of shift that happens when a parent realizes their child isn't asking for permission anymore. You've made your choice then. No, I replied. She did. I'm just finally responding to it. There was one last attempt. Just think about how this looks. I looked at my reflection in the window. Tired, maybe, but upright, still standing. I have, I said, for most of my life. She didn't answer, not immediately. And when she finally did, her voice was small. Do what you want. Then the line went dead. I held the phone to my ear for a second longer than necessary, then set it down gently on the windowsill. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't sting, but because I'd already bled out from this wound a long time ago. All she did was open a scar I'd stopped pretending would heal. And yet, there was peace in that too. My phone buzzed again. No name this time, just unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? A woman's voice came through, steady and deliberate, older, worn. I used to work under her, she said. No need to specify who. We both knew. I've got documents, screenshots, statements. I've been waiting for someone like you. I didn't rush to speak. I let her words fill the room. Thank you, I said. Let's talk. After the call ended, I walked the 2 blocks from the hotel to a quiet cafe on the corner, the kind with brick walls, good lighting, and baristas who don't ask questions. I slid into a booth facing the window, set down my coffee, untouched, and opened my phone. Notifications were still flooding in, news alerts, mentions, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. But one stood out. A video link from Ellery, marked only, "Thought you'd want to see this?" I tapped it. The clip opened to a familiar face, Darlene. Flawless as always. A single tear tracked the edge of her eyeliner. She sat across from a local reporter, hands folded in her lap, posture rigid but softened by the tissue in her hand, monogrammed and perfectly placed. I didn't know she was my sister, she said, voice cracking. I never would have treated her like that if I'd known. I watched, still as stone. She was dressed casually, Darlene continued. I thought she was just a walk-up passenger. It was a misunderstanding, a policy I didn't make. A misunderstanding. It wasn't rage that rose in me. It was fatigue, the kind that seeps into your bones when someone lies with such polish, such practiced ease. You wonder if they actually believe it themselves. I turned up the volume just slightly. The reporter nodded empathetically, as if Darlene were the victim. Overlay text flashed on the screen. Veteran flight attendant speaks out after viral humiliation scandal. Comments scrolled across the live stream. She's human. We all make mistakes. This is cancel culture. She said she was sorry. She didn't know. Why are people so cruel? But one caught my eye. She never cried for her sister. She cried for the camera. And that was it. That one line cracked something in me. Not from anger, but recognition. Because I'd seen her cry before, when she got caught spreading a rumor in high school and needed sympathy to dodge suspension. When she found out Grandpa had left me a box of handwritten letters, then turned around and said he'd always favored her. She'd cried at his funeral too, loudly, visibly, after hiding every single one of those letters from the rest of the family. Tears were her specialty. They didn't mean remorse. They meant defense, manipulation, mascara, and just the right amount of tremble. She weaponizes guilt, I muttered to myself, dresses harm in mascara and a quiver in her voice. I scrolled back to the beginning of the video, watched her dab the corner of her eye again, exact same timing, same hand, same pause before exhale. A performance. Nothing more. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the cafe buzz around me. A table of retirees debating the game last night. a young couple sharing one pair of earbuds, a server laughing too hard at a joke she'd clearly heard before. The world kept moving, even as mine reshaped. I checked my messages again, expecting more noise, but what I found was quieter. A direct message. No profile picture, no name. The text read, "You're not wrong." She cried when she buried my complaint too. I still have the original files. Want them? I stared at the screen for a few seconds, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed one word. Yes. By the next morning, I was already in Austin. The flight was early and uneventful, which felt like a small gift from the universe. I kept my headphones in the whole way. No music, just silence. My seatmate didn't ask questions. I didn't offer conversation. And when we landed, I didn't bother with a rental car. A company car was waiting at the curb. The driver didn't speak much. I appreciated that. When we pulled into the Tier 1 headquarters, I didn't hesitate. I walked through the glass front doors like I'd always belonged there. Because I did. Only this time, I wasn't walking in as someone hiding behind a title. I was walking in with receipts, with names, with proof. Ellery met me in the lobby. He looked tired, but steady. He handed me a visitor badge anyway, the kind that reads temp in red block letters. "Just optics," he said, raising an eyebrow. HR. I clipped it on. We took the elevator to the 6th floor. Conference room B. Neutral walls, long table, bottled water set out like offerings. 2 HR directors, 1 legal advisor, Ellery at the far end. No one said much. At exactly 11:32, the door opened. Darlene stepped in, 2 minutes late, full uniform, polished down to her posture, as if none of this had touched her, until she saw me. She paused mid-step. Her eyes darted from me to the badge on my chest, to Ellery, then back again. "You called this?" she asked, her tone tight but aiming for pleasant. I didn't blink. "No, the company did. I just provided the reason." She took her seat, smoothed her skirt, tilted her head like this was an HR training video. The compliance officer gestured toward me. "Ms. Trevors?" I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, looked straight at the man seated beside the speaker. "I was sent this yesterday," I said calmly. "I haven't edited it." I tapped play. Darlene's voice filled the room, crisp, confident, unmistakable. "Maribel? She's just dead weight. No one listens to her. Hell, no one even remembers she works here. Let her sit in first class if she wants to pretend." Silence followed. Not polite, not reflective, just sharp and wide, like an open wound in the center of the table. Darlene shifted in her chair. Her throat moved once, twice, but no sound came. Finally, the HR director leaned forward. "Ms. Penrose, did you say these words?" Darlene gave a half laugh, the kind she used at cocktail events when someone asked her something uncomfortable. "It was a private joke, out of context. I didn't know I was being recorded." "It wasn't a joke to me," I said, steady. "Or to the people you've pushed out, or to the culture you cultivated." Ellery set a folder on the table with quiet precision. Printed screenshots, complaint records, incident reports, names. He opened it, flipping slowly. "We have statements from at least 6 employees," he said, "some dating back 3 years. Multiple passengers, redirection of assignments based on appearance, internal memos that match your language nearly verbatim." Darlene reached for the water bottle, unscrewed the cap, didn't drink it. "This is no longer about sibling rivalry," Ellery said. "This is about workplace discrimination, documented." She stared at the table. Legal cleared his throat. "We're moving forward with a formal suspension pending ethics review." I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw her mouth open, ready to respond, to cry, to craft a new version. Then close again. She had no script left. We didn't leave the room immediately after the announcement. Nobody did. There was that strange, tense stillness in the air, the kind that settles after something breaks, but before anyone decides who's going to clean it up. Darlene sat, hands folded, eyes lowered. No protest, no performance, just silence. I walked out without a glance back. Ellery caught up with me 2 floors down in the executive hallway, just as I passed the glass-walled strategy suite. He didn't speak right away, just walked beside me like a colleague who knew when to let gravity speak first. Then, finally, he held up his phone. "Take a look," he said. "It just hit my inbox. You'll want to see this." The subject line, Urgent, Tier 1, Image Management Center, Strategic Liaison, Sato Holdings, Japan. Ellery tapped the message open and handed me the phone. The body of the email was short, precise, surgical. Given recent events and leaked internal policies related to staff appearance-based discrimination, Sato Holdings is currently reassessing all brand alignment with Tier 1 airlines. Your internal culture has become our external liability. That word stuck. Liability. It had taken less than 48 hours for something Darlene built over a decade to unravel. Not because of morality, because of optics. Back upstairs, the executive meeting was already forming. No press, no recordings. Just board members and department heads around a curved table that looked more like a dinner party than a crisis response. But no one looked relaxed. The CFO went first, voice low but sharp. If Sato Holdings pulls out, we're looking at a loss of 22% in Asia-Pacific routes. Immediate. Another exec chimed in, fingers tapping a tablet. "We've had warnings before. We chose to ignore them." Ellery and I exchanged a glance. I stayed quiet a moment longer. Then I stood. "I'm not here to gloat," I began, eyes steady. "I'm here to make sure we stop bleeding from a wound we pretended didn't exist." No one interrupted me. "This isn't just about one person," I continued. "We let a culture grow that prioritized image over people. We measured professionalism by polish. And when employees were moved, dismissed, reassigned, it wasn't to fix systems, it was to protect branding." I laid out my proposal. "They do now." I slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a certificate, lifetime upgrade access on any Tier 1 flight. No expiration, no blackout dates, and a personal note from the board. She stared at it for a few seconds before looking back at me. "I didn't fight back then," she said, her voice catching. "But you did." "I didn't need you to post about it," I told her. "I just needed you to heal." She didn't cry. She just folded the certificate slowly, like it was delicate and sacred. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, a breeze cut through the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't anonymous. Voicemail, from corporate legal. I pressed play. "Maribel, Darlene's hearing is scheduled for Friday morning. You're invited." I stared out across the street as traffic rolled by, steady and unbothered. She would walk in late, just like always. But this time, no one would stand for her. Friday morning arrived like a held breath. The kind of morning that felt quieter than it should have. No birdsong, no honking horns, just an overcast sky, a faint drizzle tapping on the glass as I sipped coffee in the lobby of Tier 1 headquarters. The elevator dinged, and I rose without checking my watch. I didn't need to. The hearing had been scheduled for 10 honk sharp, and I had no intention of being even 1 minute behind it. The hearing room was tucked behind double wood-paneled doors on the 5th floor, an unmarked space, no windows, no signage. Inside, 6 board members sat spaced evenly along one side of a long lacquered table. A legal counsel, 1 HR rep. Ellery sat at the far end, calm, collected. I took my seat across from them. No one smiled, no one offered pleasantries. And then, at 10:04, the door creaked open. She walked in, not rushed, but late. Intentional. Darlene wore a navy blazer, blouse too crisp, pants tailored but slightly wrinkled at the knees. No wings pinned to her lapel. No name tag. Just a face that used to control a room and now barely registered. She glanced around, pausing for acknowledgement that didn't come. Not from me. Not from anyone. For once, I thought. The room wasn't built around her. She took the only remaining chair, farthest from the center, cleared her throat gently as if prepping a presentation, then folded her hands in her lap. The chair of the board began. The review was methodical, nothing theatrical, just a steady reading of findings, emails, audio recordings, passenger complaints, ethics violations, every red flag that had been buried until the flood exposed them. There were moments when Darlene's lips parted, like she might object or explain, but nothing came. Maybe she realized it wasn't her script to rewrite this time. Then it was my turn. "Ms. Trevors," the chair said, "would you like to speak before the board delivers its ruling?" I looked down at the notepad in front of me. I had written something the night before. Half a page, sharp, factual, measured. But now I simply closed the pad. "No," I said. "Everything's already been said, just not heard, until now." A beat passed. Then the ruling came. Darlene Penrose. Terminated. License permanently revoked. Not eligible for rehire within the aviation network. She blinked rapidly, swallowed hard. But she didn't cry. And that, I realized, was the truest thing she'd done in years. When the session ended, we filed out without ceremony. No handshakes, no cameras. Just a slow procession of people who had seen too much and finally acted. Outside the room, the hallway echoed with the click of heels and the rustle of briefcases. I kept walking. There was no applause waiting, no warm validation, just a quiet I had earned. Justice, I thought, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs papers, closes folders, and moves on. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Like I had stepped out of a storm and wasn't dripping anymore. Weeks later, I boarded a flight. Different route, same airline. This time, the crew greeted me kindly. Not because they knew me, but because they treated every passenger like they belonged. I sat in first class, not out of defiance, but because it was my seat. Window 1A. The attendant offered me water with a smile. No tension, no scan, no pause. "Thank you," I said softly. Not because I needed to be polite, but because I meant it. And as I looked out the window at the runway stretching ahead, I whispered to myself, I didn't take this seat to prove anything. I took it because I belonged. And always did. Hi, I'm Milas. After graduation, I came home thinking I'd rest, regroup, maybe be welcomed back into the space I helped hold together. But the only thing waiting for me was a rolled-up mattress under the stairs, and silence. My parents gave my room to my sister, said she needed more space. No one asked me. Then I found my sketchbooks in trash bags. My college laptop wiped clean. They didn't scream at me. They didn't kick me out. They just slowly erased me. So I moved next door and built a pool. But want to know what they did after that? Because the worst part wasn't sleeping on the floor. It's what they said when I was finally gone. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. White trim, blue shutters, flower pots Vera replaced every spring like clockwork. But something in me knew it wasn't. Not anymore. I sat in the car a minute longer than I needed to. Let the AC run while the engine idled, just long enough for the silence to tell me what words wouldn't. The front door opened. Vera didn't wave. She didn't come running like mothers do in those videos where kids surprise them after graduation. She just stood there, arms crossed over an apron she probably hadn't taken off since breakfast, and said, "You're here. Good." I grabbed my duffel and walked up the steps. Roland was behind her, holding a cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the TV behind me, instead of his daughter returning with a degree. No one asked how the ceremony went. No one said congratulations. Vera turned and walked inside before I even reached the door. Inside, the air was cool but sharp. The smell of lemon cleaner still lingered in the hallway. Familiar but sterile. My body knew every corner of this house, but that day, it didn't feel like mine anymore. She led me past the living room, where Callista's books were spread out like she'd claimed the entire surface as a library annex, and gestured toward the stair alcove. There, beneath the stairs, was a mattress. Thin, rolled up in a faded plaid sheet I hadn't seen since high school sleepovers. A pillow sat on top like a punctuation mark to whatever sentence this was supposed to be. "This will be your spot for now," Vera said without blinking. "Callista's LSAT prep needs full focus." I didn't say a word. Roland cleared his throat behind me, then muttered, "It's temporary. You know how your sister needs structure." I nodded once, said nothing. That night, while they sat at the dinner table talking about law school rankings, I lay on the floor. It was colder than I remembered. Not the tile, the treatment. The way I'd been downgraded from daughter to houseguest in the span of one sentence. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I knew this house rewarded silence and punished the opposite. The next morning, I heard laughter from down the hall. I followed the sound, walked past the stairwell, and stopped outside what used to be my room. The door was wide open, new lighting, whiteboard on the wall, acrylic desk with gold legs, a corkboard pinned with motivational quotes. Callista stood beside Vera, both beaming as they posed for photos. The caption went up within minutes. "Proud to support our future lawyer, Sheeter Girlboss Callista." I stood in the hallway, unseen, while they celebrated the transfer of ownership like it was a real estate deal. Callista caught a glimpse of me in the reflection of the mirror and turned slightly. "I've needed this space for years," she said. "It's nice to finally have room to breathe." Vera laughed, adjusting a frame on the wall. "You deserve it, honey. You've worked so hard. The other one can sleep anywhere. The other one, not even my name, like I was a line item that had been quietly deleted." That night, I waited until the house had gone quiet before tiptoeing to the kitchen. I found a paper plate of cold spaghetti left on the counter. No note. No apology for forgetting I hadn't eaten. I sat alone, across from the TV Roland had left on mute. He always did that. Turned the sound down instead of turning the conversation up. Vera walked in briefly to refill her water. "We'll need you to keep things tidy while you figure out your next move," she said, as if I'd walked in off the street and asked for temporary shelter. On my way back to the mattress, I noticed my old World's Best Daughter mug holding a handful of spatulas in Callista's new room. I lay down, pulled the blanket over me, stared at the ceiling. Above me, her Spotify playlist played through the wall like a victory anthem. My spine ached, not from the floor, but from how deeply I had allowed them to see me as low maintenance. By morning, my back had molded to the floor's shape, every muscle stiff like I'd slept on concrete. I shuffled toward the kitchen, trying not to wake anyone, though part of me hoped I would. Let them see me stepping over my own dignity. The coffee machine groaned louder than usual. I reached for a mug, but the cabinet was nearly empty. I grabbed a chipped one with a faded cartoon owl, Callista's old study buddy cup. Ironic. As the pot dripped, I leaned against the counter and glanced up at the family calendar Vera kept taped to the fridge. She loved planning. Color-coded markers, cute stickers, every birthday, dentist appointment, HOA meeting labeled and circled. July stared back at me. Roland, July 3rd. The cat, July 12th. Callista, August 2nd, but somehow still had a giant gold star. My name wasn't there. I checked again, like I'd missed it somehow. I hadn't. Vera walked in wearing the same bathrobe she'd had since I was in high school, flipping through mail. I kept my tone even. "Did we change calendars?" She didn't even glance up. "Oh, I guess I forgot to add yours. You're an adult now, right?" I didn't respond, just turned back to the coffee, pretending I hadn't heard what I'd heard. But my birthday wasn't something you forgot. It was something you erased. Later that evening, after dinner, which I cooked, by the way, I curled up in my corner beneath the stairs with my laptop. I scrolled social media while the house fell quiet. Notifications lit up the screen, mostly ads, and a few congratulatory comments for Callista's latest mock LSAT score. Then I saw it. A Christmas post from Vera. The picture had been taken last year, in the living room. We were all there, me on the edge of the couch, Roland holding the cat, Callista in the center. I remembered that day. I had worn a sweater I thought Vera would like. The caption read, "Grateful for family, just us three." I checked the tags. Roland. Callista. No, Mylis. The comments made my throat tighten. "Beautiful family, just three of you now?" And below that, a heart emoji from Vera. Not a correction, not a clarification, just a quiet nod. My face was still in the photo, but I had been digitally erased, the way people crop out X's in old memories. It wasn't grief, it wasn't resentment, it was strategy. The next day, the weather turned warm enough to open windows. I sat on the porch step just after dusk, sipping cold tea. Across the fence, Vera's voice floated through the hedges as she chatted with our neighbor, Mrs. Hartley. "Callista's doing amazing. It's her time to shine now," Vera said brightly. "Maylis? She's still finding herself." I froze. Mrs. Hartley replied, with that uncomfortable hum people make when they don't know what else to say. You could hear the shift in energy like someone dimmed a light. "They didn't forget me," I whispered to myself. "They chose not to see me, and in doing that, they made sure everyone else stopped seeing me too." Back inside, the house smelled like leftover pasta and lemon cleaner. No one spoke to me that evening. Callista was on FaceTime in her room. Vera folded towels in silence. Roland watched a documentary in the den, volume just loud enough to pretend he didn't hear anything else. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to grab my charger. On the counter sat a cake box from that bakery Callista liked, the kind with gold ribbon and a wax seal on the front. Written on the box, in Vera's handwriting, "To Clarissa, our star." I stood there for a long time. My birthday was in 5 days. Nobody said a word. I didn't touch the cake box, just stared at it long enough to memorize the handwriting. Vera had taken her time on the lettering. Neat, slanted, almost proud. Like she was etching her approval into sugar and frosting. I slipped my charger into my bag and walked out without saying anything. The air outside was heavy, thick with early summer heat, and everything I hadn't said. The next morning was a Sunday, quiet in the way that used to feel peaceful. Now it just echoed. I walked into the kitchen again, hoping for coffee, and maybe silence that didn't hurt. Roland was in his usual spot on the couch, half watching a golf tournament, half dozing with the remote balanced on his stomach. I lingered by the sink before finally asking, "Dad, do you think I'll get back on my feet soon?" He blinked at the TV, didn't look my way. "Things have a way of working out, kiddo. You just gotta ride the wave." I waited. Nothing else came. No, "You've got this." No, "We're proud of you." Not even a glance. He didn't throw me out, but he also didn't ask me to stay. After lunch, I stepped out the side door to shake off the weight in my chest. That side yard had always been a place where forgotten things collected. Old planters, broken pool toys, busted folding chairs. This time, it was my turn. Near the garbage bin sat a box, medium-sized, worn, marked in black Sharpie like something out of a yard sale. Mylis. Old books, art junk. At first, I thought maybe it was something Vera had pulled from the attic, something she'd meant to donate and forgot. But the handwriting was recent. Clean, fresh ink. I knelt down and peeled the top open. Sketchbooks from college, including my final portfolio. The small lava lamp I'd used in my dorm. And a birthday card, still sealed, from Aunt Narita. I knew that envelope. She always used the ones with the floral print borders. The weight of it all hit slower than I expected. No rage, just realization. They were packing up pieces of my life like it was clutter, expired inventory that no longer served their aesthetic. I left the box where it was. Back inside, I walked past Callista's room. The door was half open, her voice floating out as she practiced an opening statement into her phone like some faux courtroom. On the door, a custom nameplate read, "Callista R. Simmons, Future JD." Someone had printed it and laminated it. Vera's touch, no doubt. I kept walking, eyes straight ahead, heading back toward my corner under the stairs. Vera was coming from the laundry room, arms full of sheets. She stopped just long enough to say, "Can you keep the stair area clear today? It's getting a little cramped when the laundry's out." She said it without malice. No snide tone. Just casual, like asking someone to move their shoes. I nodded. Didn't argue. Just filed it away. That night, I pulled out my sketchbook, the one they hadn't found yet, and opened to a blank page. I didn't draw, didn't plan. I wrote one line in pen, so firm it bled through to the next sheet. She chose Callista, Dad let her. Then I closed the book and turned off the light. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still, quiet in that eerie way right before something cracks. I gathered my things to head out for a coffee, not because I needed the caffeine, but because I needed a reason to be somewhere else. The library was a 15-minute walk. I liked passing the bakery on the corner, the one that smelled like sugar and memory. Callista used to beg for their cinnamon rolls when we were kids. Now she just ordered protein bars online. I stopped by the coffee shop across the street, ordered a black drip, and tapped my card against the reader. Declined. I tried again, slower. Like that would change the outcome. Declined. Want to try another? The barista asked politely, but loud enough for the woman behind me to hear. I fumbled for my phone, logged into my banking app. The screen took longer than usual to load. Then it showed the message that burned through my chest. Account closed by Guardian. It was the same account Vera had helped me open in high school. She'd called it my safety net, said it was there for emergencies, for the unexpected. I guess I didn't realize I had become the emergency. I left the coffee on the counter, walked outside with nothing but questions in my hands. That afternoon, Vera announced we were having a family talk after dinner. She even made lemonade and brought out the good cookies, the ones from the bakery she only used for holidays and Callista's achievements. We sat around the table like strangers playing house. Roland flipped his phone screen down, a silent declaration that he wouldn't be helpful. Callista had a highlighter in her hand, underlining something on a law prep sheet like the rest of us weren't there. Vera leaned back, crossed her legs, and smiled. "So, I know we've had a bit of a rough patch, but I'd really like us to keep things light. Callista's mock scores came in, top 5%. Isn't that amazing?" I looked down at the table. My hands were steady, but my voice had to fight through a layer of disbelief. "You closed my bank account," I said flatly. Vera didn't flinch. "It was under my name. It wasn't a forever thing." "You didn't even tell me," I replied. She sipped her lemonade. "Let's not bring that energy here. We're trying to keep this house positive." Positive. That word, like my frustration was a toxin, like I was something they had to scrub clean to keep the vibe right. Roland didn't say a word, just folded a napkin into smaller and smaller squares. Callista smiled behind her glass. "Maybe this is your sign to finally start something on your own." I stared at her, at them. This wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. Later that night, I climbed the stairs slowly, past the closed door that used to be mine. A sign now hung outside. Callista's study zone, do not disturb. It was laminated. I kept walking. Back at the bottom of the stairs, I sat on the floor and opened my sketch pad again. No doodles this time, no poetic lines. Just the truth. When you're labeled a problem for pointing out pain, you learn to stop sharing. And maybe that's what they wanted all along. Not to help me heal, but to make sure I stayed quiet enough not to embarrass them. I pulled out my laptop, opened a blank spreadsheet, and titled it, Steps to Independence, Phase 1. I started with what I had, listed my shifts at the diner, my design clients, my savings, what little remained. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I knew it wouldn't have their names on it. The days blurred after that. Between shifts at the diner and late nights sorting design files, I barely had time to breathe, much less feel. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting for their permission anymore. I was building something that didn't require it. That Wednesday, I came home early from a client consult. They'd needed help visualizing a new brand for their gardening service, and for the first time in weeks, I'd left a meeting feeling seen, valued, like what I made had weight. The sun was still out, casting sharp lines through the side hallway as I stepped through the laundry door. I almost didn't notice it at first, the black trash bag tucked beside the washer. Ordinary, out of place only because it had my name written on it in thick marker. Mayless. Old clothes, art stuff. I froze. For a second, I told myself it must be a mix-up. Maybe Vera had boxed something for donation and grabbed the wrong bag. But the handwriting was hers. Sharp, tidy, deliberate. I knelt and opened it. On top, my senior portfolio, still bound in the blue folder I had used for my final critique. Below it, my high school art medals. Not many, but they had once meant something. At the bottom, a bent envelope. The card Nerida had given me last birthday, still sealed. I'd kept it tucked away for when I needed a reminder that someone in this family still saw me. And now it sat in a bag meant for the curb. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment before walking in. Vera was at the sink, rinsing strawberries. Callista sat at the island scrolling on her phone. "Who moved my things?" I asked. Vera didn't look up. "We needed to make space. You hadn't touched those in years." Callista chuckled softly. "I thought that lava lamp died back in college." I didn't respond. I didn't give them the pleasure of reaction. But I saw it clearly now. They weren't throwing me out in one dramatic act. They were dismantling me quietly, one object at a time. That evening, I passed by the dining table as Vera sorted through envelopes. A cousin's wedding was coming up. I paused to glance at the stack, white with gold trim, classic. One caught my eye. The ink looked smeared. I reached for it. My name had been written, then crossed out. Below it, in cleaner ink, Callista. "That was mine," I said, holding up the envelope. "You're not going, are you?" Vera asked. "Callista's representing the family." Callista didn't even look up. "It's more my crowd anyway." I stared at the paper. It wasn't just an oversight. It was a reassignment. Like my spot in the family was transferable. Optional. I walked out without another word. Later that night, I sat on the porch. The air was thick with June heat and the hum of mosquitoes near the screen. I opened my laptop and typed slowly, methodically. Exit strategy. Independent within 90 days. I listed every shift I could pick up, every freelance contact I hadn't yet reached out to. I wrote down my weekly grocery budget, canceled every subscription that wasn't a necessity. Then I printed it, folded the sheet once, wrote in all caps across the top. This time, they don't decide. I went to bed just before midnight. As I passed the back door, I glanced at the laundry corner again. The trash bag was gone. But through the side window, near the curb, I saw it. Set out with the others. That morning, I couldn't stop checking Zillow. Not for escape fantasies or faraway listings in places I'd never afford. Just curiosity. Local homes, nearby streets. I told myself it was harmless. I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't have the money. But something in me was restless. An itch under my skin that I couldn't explain away anymore. After lunch, I took a walk. I told Vera I needed fresh air. She didn't look up from her tablet. It had been weeks since I walked the block without rushing somewhere. The neighborhood felt smaller now, like it had shrunk without my permission. Most of the houses looked just as I remembered them. Neatly trimmed lawns, porch flags, wind chimes still spinning in slow motion. But then I saw it. Next door. A wooden post had been hammered into the lawn, slightly crooked. The sign was red and white. For sale, open house this weekend. I stopped walking. It was the old Jensen house, the one with the pale blue shutters, overgrown hydrangeas, and a gate that always squeaked no matter how much you oiled it. I used to play there as a kid. Hide and seek in the backyard, popsicles on the porch. It had been empty for years. But now, I stood at the edge of the sidewalk staring at it, heart thudding. It wasn't just a house. It was next to theirs. Not with them, but visible. Side by side, but separate. The thought planted itself like a seed. That evening, I sat on the back steps as the sun folded into the trees. Vera stood in the garden, clipping dead leaves with the neighbor, Mrs. Renly. They didn't see me sitting quietly by the screen door. They rarely did. "She's just staying temporarily," Vera said, voice light, like this was a weather update. "Callista's the one really building a future. She's got direction, that's the difference." Mrs. Renly hummed her agreement, or at least didn't object. That was the safest thing to do with people like Vera. Nod, smile, avoid the mess. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch. That sentence was a verdict. It wasn't spoken in anger. It was said with certainty, like she was reporting the news, like it was settled. She wasn't clarifying my place. She was erasing it, just softly enough not to be called cruel. That night, I crawled into my corner beneath the stairs and stared at the laptop screen until my eyes burned. I opened a new tab, typed First-Time Homebuyer Resources. Another tab, FHA Loans, Texas. Then, Freelance Design Average Income. And another, How to Estimate Renovation Costs. I read for hours. Then I pulled out a piece of scrap paper from the bottom of my bag and drew a rectangle, added a desk, a window, a bookshelf. Then I drew a small patio and a pool. Not a big one, just enough for one person. Enough to float, breathe. It wasn't for guests. It wasn't for Instagram. It was for me. They'd never give me a seat at their table. I'd accepted that, but I could build one next door. And when I sat down, it would be because I chose the chair, not because someone pulled it out for me. The next morning, while reheating old coffee, my phone buzzed. An alert from Zillow. Price drop, 4278, Magnolia Lane, now listed at $172,900. I stared at it. Then, quietly, I smiled. The price drop buzzed in my pocket all day. I didn't reply to the alert, didn't bookmark the listing, but the numbers sat with me, burned themselves into the back of my mind like a dare I wasn't sure I was allowed to accept. That night, I was reviewing brand sketches for a new client, a florist who wanted to reintroduce her business after 20 years of word of mouth. She was sweet, blunt, and didn't care about hashtags. Just wanted her story to be seen again. While exporting the files, I mindlessly opened Instagram. Big mistake. The screen opened to Callista's story. She was filming a room tour. My old room. "From junk room to glam zone," she said, camera panning over white furniture, fairy lights, a wall of Polaroids, none of which included me. We had to totally start from scratch. The energy in here used to be so stale. Vera laughed in the background. It was a mess. We barely saved anything. They didn't just redecorate. They erased, painted over my memory like I'd been a bad stain. I watched the whole video, twice. Her caption sealed it. Choose new era, or glow up. Make space for what matters. Not a single word about who lived there first, about the girl who slept under the stairs while they built this new shrine. I wasn't even angry yet. I was stunned. They made it content. The next night, I opened Instagram again. I don't know why. Maybe I hoped I'd misread it all. Maybe I wanted proof that it wasn't as cruel as it felt. Instead, I saw her post. A black background, white script. Some people are chapters, others are the whole story. Caption, know your role. Some people just fill space. The comments rolled in like confetti. Yes! Say it louder for the ones still hanging around. You're everything, girl. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. But I saved the post. Not because I needed a reminder of what she said, but because someday someone would ask me why I left, and I wanted to show them the answer. I sat with that for a while. Then opened a new file on my computer and began piecing together a mood board for my next client, a landscaping company needing a new brand. But halfway through, I renamed the project, Presence Without Permission. The collage started forming around the edges. A keyhole, a small backyard patio, A woman's silhouette, standing in her own doorway, holding nothing but a coffee cup and her own piece. I added the word threshold, then blueprint, then view. At the top, in white sans serif. The person they thought wouldn't fight back is building a view they can't block. I stared at it for a while, hands still on the keyboard, then leaned back and closed my eyes. It wasn't anger anymore. It was strategy. Later that night, I got an email from a new lead. Loved your work for Bloomin' Root. I'm launching a small interior brand. Interested in logo and full visual identity. Budget approved. I read the message twice, smiled. They weren't done erasing me, but they no longer controlled the narrative. By sunrise, I had already dressed, packed, and folded the lease draft twice before slipping it into my backpack. The house was still. That particular kind of quiet that didn't feel earned, just imposed. I walked down the hallway with calm I hadn't felt in years. My feet moved without hesitation, and yet my heart held a steady, cool beat. I paused at the side cabinet near the laundry room. That's where I kept everything that mattered. Birth certificate, tax forms, and my emergency envelope. It was always locked. Until today. The latch clicked open with no effort. Inside, my files were shuffled. One folder was missing entirely. The envelope was gone. Not moved. Not buried. Gone. I stood there longer than I probably should have, waiting to hear someone explain. But the hallway stayed silent, smug, and still. Vera was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters like it was just another morning. Callista was on the phone, her voice saccharine and loud, something about brand opportunities and targeting Gen Z engagement. Roland sat nearby, flipping through the newspaper like it was still 1995. I walked in and set my hand on the back of a chair. "Did you open my drawer?" I asked. Vera didn't flinch. "It's my house. You don't get to claim corners." Callista laughed like I'd told a joke. "No," I said, voice steady. "I asked a real question." Vera turned to face me then. Her face held that familiar tone, the one she wore during parent-teacher conferences and HOA meetings. Civil, prepared. "You shouldn't leave things lying around if they're that important." It wasn't lying around. It was locked. But facts didn't matter in this house, not if they made anyone else look bad. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked out and shut the door gently behind me. At the diner that evening, I was halfway through my shift when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Financial services. I stepped into the back hallway near the dish pit and answered. "Hi, this is Megan with FAFSA Processing. We're following up about your recent application. Looks like your guarantor has been removed. The refinancing can't proceed without a new one in place." My chest went cold. "Wait, what?" "Looks like the parent signature was revoked. You'll need to reapply as an independent." I logged into my account as soon as I got off the call. There it was. Vera's name, gone. A red alert flashing across the screen. Application denied. Below that, in clean blue font, Clarissa Simmons, financially independent, verified. It didn't take a genius to figure it out. They didn't just stop supporting me. They handed the whole playbook to Callista. My mother hadn't just stepped back. She'd switched teams. Back home, I didn't waste time. I walked straight past the kitchen. Didn't wait for a pause in Callista's call. Didn't acknowledge Vera as she loaded the dishwasher. I went to my corner, grabbed my duffel, pulled out the printed lease from my bag. I folded a towel slowly, deliberately. I packed only what was mine. No borrowed chargers, no shared mugs, nothing that could be debated later. I pulled my key off my lanyard and set it on the kitchen table. No one looked up. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to end. They had stopped calling it home long before I ever dared to leave. I walked down the front path without hesitation. The porch light flickered behind me like it always did. A glitch no one ever cared to fix. The night air wrapped around me, calm and sure. I didn't turn back. The next morning, Vera opened the fridge to reach for the orange juice. A post-it note stared back at her. stuck squarely in the middle of the carton. In my handwriting, "I'm not yours to edit." The morning after I left, I took my coffee out to the porch of the villa, my porch now, and sat barefoot on the top step. The quiet was different here, less choreographed. I didn't have to listen for footsteps or silence my own. I could just exist. The lavender plants I'd placed in recycled pots lined the edge of the walkway, still recovering from their transplant shock. Kind of like me. I finished the last sip and headed out for a client meeting across town. The coffee shop was on Main, 2 blocks from the community center. Familiar. A little too familiar. After our project review, I stood in line for a refill. The barista, someone who had known me since high school, tilted her head when she saw me. "Didn't know you were back in town," she chirped, pushing the lid onto my cup. "Visiting for the week?" I smiled. Polite. Warm enough not to start anything. But something sharp caught behind my ribs. "I never left," I said. She blinked. "Oh, huh. Thought you were out of state or something." I shook my head and walked out. They hadn't just erased me inside the house. They'd rewritten me outside it too. The next Sunday, I heard it from someone in the HOA. Apparently, Vera and Roland had attended one of the monthly brunches, the ones where everyone brought deviled eggs and swapped gossip under the guise of civic pride. The Simmons family still played their part. "She's thriving," Vera had said proudly. "Callista's deep into her pre-law program. She's got real direction." Someone at the table, Mrs. Hensley, I think, had asked, "And my lease?" Vera's tone had shifted, a beat too soft, a touch too rehearsed. "She's exploring. You know how it is with creatives." Roland didn't speak, just poked at his plate, quiet as ever. The person telling me this had looked a little embarrassed just repeating it. I think everyone could feel it, that pause. I nodded. I already knew that silence. I'd lived in it. That pause? It said everything. Later that week, I was out front trimming dead leaves from the lavender when Mr. and Mrs. Ellis walked by. They were older, had been neighbors since we were kids. We'd borrowed sugar from them more times than I could count. They stopped at the edge of the path, looking over the hedges. "Well now," Mrs. Ellis said, "we heard you moved in here. It's really beautiful what you've done." I glanced up, unsure how to take it. "Thank you." "It's quiet," she added after a moment. "But powerful." She didn't mean the decor. She meant me, the house, the statement. They waved and kept walking. I watched them go, then turned back to the plants. That evening, after I showered and folded laundry, I found a small envelope slid under my door. The handwriting on the front was simple, familiar. Inside was a torn sheet of lined paper, the kind Roland always kept in a kitchen drawer for to-do lists and grocery reminders. The note had only one sentence. "Your mother doesn't know I wrote this, but I saw what they did. I'm sorry." No name, no signature, just the weight of something that had taken years to come loose. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the paper still open in my hand, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. Not entirely. The next day, I pulled out my old laptop to prep for a client consult. The villa was quiet, the morning light slanting through the blinds, dust catching in the air like it had nowhere better to be. I clicked the power button and waited. The familiar startup tone buzzed, and for a moment, everything felt normal. But when the screen loaded, it wasn't my desktop. No folders, no documents. Just a bland, factory reset home screen like the machine had never belonged to anyone. I opened the file browser, checked every drive. Nothing. My portfolio. My client templates. Gone. At first, I thought it was a glitch, a system failure. Then I remembered something. Months ago, Callista had borrowed my laptop, said her own was running updates, and she had a last-minute submission for a legal fellowship application. She was frantic, loud, pacing, so I handed it over without a second thought. Now, everything I had ever built inside that drive was erased, not wiped by accident, deleted with intention. I sat back in the chair and let that sit in my chest for a full minute. It wasn't the files. It was the fact that someone looked at my work and decided it was expendable. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store to restock on the essentials: almond milk, oats, spinach, candles. I'd learned how to shop for solitude. While loading a small bag into the back seat, I heard my name. Malis! I turned. Vera stood by the trunk of her car, chatting with a woman I vaguely recognized from church years ago. A social smiler, the kind who always found a way to ask about your life in front of others. Vera waved me over. "Look who's here!" I nodded, polite. The woman smiled and asked what I was up to these days. Before I could answer, Vera jumped in. "Oh, she's doing some fun artsy stuff. Designing social media logos and such. Creative outlet, you know?" It was the way she said fun, like I was coloring at a diner table with crayons and a placemat. I let the pause stretch. Then I met the woman's eyes and said, "Actually, I just wrapped a full brand campaign for a regional wellness chain. You'll see my work on the billboards down by Main Street next month." The woman blinked. Vera blinked harder. I didn't stay for the awkward follow-up. That evening, I sat out on my patio with my laptop, logged into my site, and hit Update. I uploaded the latest campaign, rewrote the About section to reflect what I had actually done, not what they thought I did. I didn't need applause. I needed presence. They had written me out of their story. So I started writing my own. That night, I checked Instagram one more time. I know, I shouldn't have, but I did. Callista had posted another selfie, hair curled, blazer sharp. The caption read, "When you're the one the family believes in. Some people were born to inspire, others to follow." There was no mistaking who that was for. I didn't react. I didn't scroll. I took a screenshot, saved it to a folder titled Fuel. Then I opened a client presentation I'd been prepping and added a new title slide: How to Own the Story Without Saying a Word. The sunrise filtered in slow, golden, and quiet through the back window of the villa. My villa. I poured hot coffee into the chipped ceramic mug Nerida had sent me years ago, back when I still thought birthday cards from her were the only proof I mattered. I didn't dress up, didn't need to. I was home. The curtain over the sink window stayed open that morning, and I didn't close it. Let it face Vera's kitchen. Let it frame her view the way she'd spent so long trying to edit mine. At some point, I felt the familiar weight of her gaze through the blinds. I didn't shift, didn't wave. She blinked and turned away, like she'd seen something she wasn't ready to name. The pool out back was still unfinished. The tiling had just been sealed, but the water hadn't been filled yet. And still, it reflected the sun with a kind of discipline I envied. This piece wasn't gifted. I fought for every inch of it. That afternoon, I was pulling weeds near the lavender bed when I heard the creak of the side fence. Roland stood there, one hand gripping the wood, the other shoved into his pocket. He looked like someone who'd wandered into the wrong memory. "You really did it," he said, barely above the wind. "I did," I replied, not looking up from the soil. He paused, watching me gather dead leaves into a small pile. "Your mom. She doesn't know what to do with it." "She doesn't have to," I said, standing up straight. "I didn't build it for her." He nodded. That kind of nod you give when there's more to say, but not enough courage to say it. We both knew that was his way of admitting he saw it all, that he'd always seen it. But silence was easier than truth in our house. I didn't resent him for it anymore. I just stopped needing anything from it. Back inside, I turned on my laptop in the office, my office, and opened an email draft. A clean line across the top read, "Client, Serenity Wellness." I attached the final brand package: color palette, logos, social templates, mission statement copy, all designed from a place that was entirely mine. I added a quick note: "Dear Nina, please find the final assets attached. Thank you for trusting me with your vision. It was an honor to build it from this new space. Warmly, Milas." Before I hit send, I looked at the wall across from me. On it were pinned prints of my last 3 projects. A photo of me and Nerida from a beach trip 3 summers ago, and her handwritten card, framed in matte black. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. The patio called to me in that soft evening kind of way. I carried my mug out, barefoot, letting the warm wood settle beneath me. The sky was that quiet pink gray just before dusk. My favorite. I sat by the pool, feet just skimming the smooth concrete edge. Then, the sound of a door sliding open. Vera stepped out slowly, a trash bag in one hand. Her shoulders were tense. She moved like someone unsure of her welcome. Her eyes landed on me. We didn't speak. She paused. Then she turned back inside, and I stayed exactly where I was. I didn't move. I didn't shrink. I didn't smirk. I just breathed. The next evening, I was wiping down the kitchen counter when my phone buzzed. I expected a delivery update or a client invoice. Instead, it was a message from Kimberly Saunders, someone I hadn't spoken to since sophomore year. We were never close, mostly just shared study guides and traded glances when teachers asked for volunteers. Her message was short. "Hey, did your mom really post this? It's kind of wild." A YouTube link followed. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked. The video was titled, "Raising Women of Value, My Journey as a Mother." There she was. Vera, hairpinned, blazer pressed, eyes locked on the camera like it owed her something. She spoke about values, discipline, how motherhood is a series of strategic investments. She talked about raising daughters who lead. Callista's name came up 6 times. Her LSAT scores, her volunteer work, her potential. I watched the full 22 minutes. My name was never mentioned, not once, not even a footnote. When the video ended, YouTube queued up a makeup tutorial. I clicked X and shut the laptop without flinching. I didn't rage, I didn't shake. I just stood up, walked to the back door, and opened it. Outside, the pool caught the last traces of twilight. That light blue that almost looks silver if you squint hard enough. I stepped out, barefoot, the concrete still warm from the day. That weekend, I hosted dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled vegetables, a bowl of herbed couscous, and wine in mismatched glasses. Nerida came, wearing her usual linen shirt and bringing a pie I suspected she'd bought instead of baked. 2 of my clients came by too, Lauren from the wellness chain and Derek from the florist project. They'd never met each other, but talked like old friends under the string lights I'd stapled across the fence. We didn't toast. We didn't make speeches. But then, as we leaned back in our chairs and the night settled soft around us, Nerida raised her glass and said, "To the kind of strength that doesn't need a witness, but earns one anyway." I didn't cry. I didn't say thank you. I just lifted my glass back, nodded once, and felt full in a way no holiday dinner at Vera's ever managed. Later, when everyone had gone and the candles burned low, I opened my laptop again. This time, I navigated to my site. Clicked About the Founder, typed slowly. When they gave my room away, they gave me something else, a reason to build what they couldn't take from me. I hit Publish. That morning, I woke before the alarm. The house was still, birds just beginning to speak. I pulled on a robe, opened the sliding door, and stepped into the crisp morning. Across the fence, Vera's curtain was open. She was there, her silhouette stiff, eyes locked across the yard. She didn't move. Neither did I. I picked up my towel, walked calmly to the pool, and slid into the water. Not to swim, not to escape. Just to float, steady, still, certain. Some things are built in silence. Some views are only visible when you stop looking back.